Pregnant and rejected, she slept alone in a park, protecting her belly with her arms and fear in her eyes. From his mansion, a millionaire bound to a wheelchair observed this scene night after night. Without telling anyone, he created a bold plan: offer marriage in exchange for shelter. What seemed like madness turned into love and a battle that would put all prejudices to the test. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. Olivia watched the rain falling over Chicago through the hospital window. Her hand instinctively caressed the small protrusion of her 5-month belly. Alone in the waiting room, she tried to control her anxiety while waiting for the test results. The sound of raindrops against the glass formed a melancholy melody that seemed to accompany the accelerated beats of her heart. "Ms. Olivia Parker," called the nurse, interrupting her thoughts. "The doctor will see you now." Taking a deep breath, Olivia adjusted her simple coat and headed to the office. The doctor, a middle-aged man with graying hair, received her with a gentle smile, but his eyes revealed concern. "Olivia, your test results have arrived," he began, adjusting his glasses. "I need to be frank with you. The pregnancy shows complications. You'll need absolute rest in the coming weeks and rigorous monitoring." The doctor's words echoed like distant thunder. Absolute rest. How could she do that while living as a guest in her friend Debbie's small studio apartment, who had taken her in when her parents kicked her out after discovering the pregnancy? How could she stop working as a cashier at the supermarket, her only means of support? "Doctor, I can't afford it. I'm living as a guest. I need to work," she confessed, feeling tears begin to form. The doctor sighed, understanding. "Olivia, I understand your situation, but we're talking about your health and your baby's health. There are social programs. Perhaps we can contact the hospital's social services." Olivia left the office with a prescription in one hand and a stack of social assistance papers in the other. The rain had increased and she didn't have an umbrella, typical of days when everything seemed to conspire against her. A few blocks away, in the penthouse of one of the most luxurious buildings on Michigan Avenue, Anthony Miller observed the same rain. His wheelchair was positioned by the panoramic window that offered a privileged view of the city. At 38, he commanded the Miller construction empire, inherited from his father, even after the accident that had left him paraplegic 3 years earlier. "Mr. Anthony, the board is waiting," announced his secretary Martha, a lady who had faithfully served him for more than 20 years. "Tell them I'm coming," he replied without taking his eyes off the window. The meeting room was intimidating, a solid mahogany table surrounded by 10 executives in impeccable suits. Anthony entered, maneuvering his chair with the skill of someone who had become accustomed to that reality. The sudden silence and the mixed looks of pity and impatience were routine. "Gentlemen, let's get straight to the point," he began, positioning himself at the head of the table. "What's the situation with the Gardens of Hope housing project?" Richard Miller, his cousin and the company's financial director, cleared his throat before answering. "Anthony, the project is stalled. The costs are out of control and the financial return is questionable. The board recommends that we suspend the project." The Gardens of Hope project was Anthony's dream, to build quality, affordable housing, with spaces adapted for people with disabilities. It was more than a development. It was his way of leaving a legacy, of proving that the tragedy that had confined him to a wheelchair had not destroyed his ability to make a difference. "The project continues," he stated firmly. "Find new partners, reduce margins. But the Gardens of Hope will happen." The executives exchanged uncomfortable looks, but no one dared to challenge him directly. The meeting proceeded with discussions about other developments, numbers, graphs, and projections. Anthony actively participated, but his mind wandered to the project he considered his redemption. At the end of the meeting, Richard approached him privately. "Cousin, we need to talk about the Gardens of Hope. It's not just a financial issue. The board is concerned about your obstinance." "Obstinance?" Anthony repeated, feeling anger rise. "Is that what they call determination now?" Or perhaps you think a man in a wheelchair shouldn't have ambitious dreams. Richard backed away, uncomfortable. It's not that, Anthony. We just want the company to continue prospering. Your father built this empire, and since the accident... Since the accident what? You think I lost my capability, along with the movement in my legs? Anthony turned his chair, moving away. The meeting is over, Richard. Back in his office, Anthony felt the weight of loneliness. The walls covered with awards and certificates seemed to mock his current condition. The Miller empire was thriving, but at what personal cost? Since the accident that took his wife and his mobility, only work remained. He hadn't started a family, had no children. The mansion where he lived, though luxurious and completely adapted to his needs, was a cold and empty space. That same night, Olivia arrived soaked at the small apartment she shared with Debbie. Her friend, a night shift nurse, had left a note. On the refrigerator, "There's soup on the stove, rest kisses." Debbie's kindness was the only comfort amid the chaos her life had become. After heating the soup, Olivia sat at the tiny table and opened the hospital papers. The words seemed to jumble before her tired eyes. Social assistance, income verification, documents, an endless bureaucracy for someone who needed immediate help. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was the supermarket supervisor. "Olivia, I'm sorry, but we can't keep employees who need extended leave. Your situation is complicated, I understand, but we have a business to run." The words were direct, with no room for contestation. Olivia mechanically thanked her and hung up. In a matter of hours, she had lost her job and received medical orders for bed rest. How would she survive? How would she ensure a future for her child? That night, two lonely souls contemplated the same stormy sky. Olivia, embracing her belly, as her only comfort, cried silently on the improvised sofa bed. Anthony, in his luxurious penthouse, drank expensive whiskey while trying to drive away the ghosts of the past. Neither of them imagined how their destinies were about to intertwine in an extraordinary way. The next morning, the timid sun appeared among scattered clouds, like a fragile promise that the storm had passed. Olivia woke up with an aching body. She had slept poorly, tormented by nightmares where she saw herself alone on a dark street, protecting her belly while accusatory voices echoed around. Debbie had already left for another shift, leaving a new note. "Made an interview for you. Administrative assistant at the clinic where I work. Take your resume, 2 p.m. Address below, everything will be fine." A thread of hope. Olivia hugged the note as if it were a precious amulet. Perhaps this was the new beginning she so desperately needed. Her job in a clinic could be compatible with her condition, less physically demanding than the supermarket. She dressed carefully, using the only formal outfit she owned. In front of the mirror, she rehearsed smiles and answers to possible questions. Her belly was now visible under the tight fabric of the blazer. "We're a team, little one," she whispered, caressing her belly. "We'll make it." In his office, Anthony was reviewing the Gardens of Hope project. The costs were indeed alarming, but there was something deeper in his insistence. After the accident, he had realized how hostile the world was for people with disabilities. Even with all his resources, he faced daily barriers. What would it be like for those who didn't have his privilege? Martha entered silently, bringing a folder. "Sir, the resumes for the social project's assistant position." Anthony nodded. The Miller Foundation, the social arm of the construction company, needed someone to coordinate community initiatives related to the Gardens of Hope. Perhaps he would find an ally for his cause there. "Schedule interviews with the 3 most qualified for tomorrow," he instructed, returning the folder after a quick analysis. The phone rang. It was Richard again. "Anthony, the bank is questioning the viability of the project. We need an urgent meeting." "Schedule it for Friday. I'll go to the bank personally," he responded, feeling frustration grow. As he hung up, Anthony turned, his chair to the window. Down below, the city pulsed. People walking hurriedly, cars honking, the frantic routine of Chicago. Somewhere among those streets was someone who would change his life forever, though he didn't know it yet. The St. Clair Clinic building impressed Olivia. A modern construction, with a glass facade and a spacious lobby. Feeling diminutive, She adjusted her worn blazer and approached the receptionist. "Good afternoon, I have a 2 o'clock interview for the administrative assistant position." The receptionist examined her from head to toe with a look that paused for several seconds on her visible belly before responding with forced politeness. "Third floor, room 305. In the elevator, Olivia took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. When the doors opened, she was faced with an elegant corridor. She followed the signs until she found room 305, where a secretary received her. "Olivia Parker, please wait a moment. Dr. Camilla is finalizing a meeting." 5 minutes later, the office door opened and an elegant woman of approximately 50 years appeared. Her face hardened slightly upon noticing Olivia's pregnancy, but her voice remained professional as she invited her in. The interview started promisingly. Olivia highlighted her previous administrative experience, her computer knowledge, and her willingness to learn. Dr. Camilla made occasional notes, nodding with moderate interest. "Olivia, your resume is adequate, but I need to be transparent," the director finally said, adjusting her glasses. "We need someone with full availability. Your current condition represents a problem. You'll soon need leave, and then you'll have a baby to care for." Olivia felt as if she had been struck. "Doctor, I can guarantee my commitment. As for the leave, it's just the basic rights provided by law and—" "I know the laws," Dr. Camilla interrupted coldly. "And I also know the reality of a busy clinic. I'm sorry, but we need someone without impediments." The interview ended with empty words of "we'll be in touch" that both knew were a lie. Olivia left the room feeling humiliated. In the corridor, she leaned against the wall, breathing deeply to contain the tears that threatened to escape. She couldn't break down there, not in front of everyone. While trying to compose herself, she didn't notice the approach of a wheelchair until a male voice sounded nearby. "Are you feeling all right, ma'am?" Olivia opened her eyes, meeting the concerned gaze of a man in his early 30s, seated in a motorized wheelchair. He wore an impeccably cut suit and had a posture that emanated authority, despite his physical condition. I'm fine," she responded, straightening quickly and wiping away furtive tears. "Just a bit dizzy." Anthony Miller observed her attentively. Something about that pregnant young woman, visibly shaken, aroused his curiosity. Perhaps it was the dignity with which she tried to hide her fragility, or perhaps it was just the instinct he had developed to recognize people in difficulty. "Martha," he called, addressing the lady who accompanied him. "Could you get a glass of water for the young lady, please?" The secretary nodded and moved away quickly. Anthony maneuvered his chair to face Olivia. "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Anthony Miller. Are you here for a consultation?" "Olivia Parker," she responded, automatically, feeling uncomfortable with the attention. "Actually, I was in a job interview, but—" Her voice failed, and she didn't complete the sentence. Something lit up in Anthony's gaze. "Interview for what position, if I may ask?" "Administrative assistant, but they made it clear that a pregnant woman isn't welcome," she replied, with a hint of bitterness she couldn't hide. Before Anthony could respond, Martha returned with the water. Olivia thanked her and drank slowly, taking advantage of the seconds to reorganize her thoughts. "Mr. Miller, we need to go. The consultation is scheduled for 5 minutes from now," Martha reminded. Anthony nodded, but before moving away, he took a card from his suit and extended it to Olivia. "We have an open position at the Miller Foundation, Social Projects Assistant. If you're interested, call this number tomorrow and mention my name." Olivia accepted the card automatically, confused by the unexpected offer. "Thank you, but you don't even know my qualifications." A slight smile curved Anthony's lips. "I have good instincts for people, and I believe that someone who faces their own daily battles better understands the struggles of others." With these enigmatic words, he moved away down the corridor, leaving Olivia with a mix of confusion and hope. Looking at the luxurious card in her hands, she recognized the name of the city's largest construction company. What was someone like Anthony Miller doing at a medical clinic, and why would he be interested in helping a stranger? The next day, After a night of reflection and encouraged by Debbie, Olivia called the number on the card. To her surprise, she was answered by Martha herself, who seemed to be expecting her call. An interview was scheduled for that very afternoon at the headquarters of the Miller Foundation. The imposing construction company building was intimidating, with its 40 floors of glass and steel. Olivia felt minuscule as she entered the marble lobby, where a receptionist directed her to the 38th floor. Martha received her with a warm smile that contrasted with the coldness of the environment. "Miss Parker, welcome. Mr. Miller is waiting. For you." Anthony's office was surprisingly welcoming for an executive of his level. Large windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but the environment was humanized by plants, books, and photographs that suggested a personality beyond business. "Olivia, thank you for coming," Anthony greeted, maneuvering his chair to go around the desk and receive her. "Please sit down." The interview proceeded in a surprisingly informal manner. Anthony seemed more interested in knowing her as a person than in her technical skills, though these were also addressed. Olivia talked about her education in administration, interrupted in the last year due to lack of resources, about her previous jobs, and with some hesitation, about her current situation. "I'm alone in this pregnancy," she finally admitted. "The baby's father disappeared when I told him, and my family, well, let's say they have traditional views about children out of wedlock." Anthony nodded without showing judgment. "And your medical condition?" "I noticed you were at the clinic yesterday." Olivia hesitated. Would honesty be a trap? But something in Anthony's gaze encouraged her to continue. "I have complications in the pregnancy. The doctor recommended rest, which led to my dismissal from the supermarket where I worked. That's why I was so desperate for that interview yesterday." "I see," he responded, drumming his fingers on the desk. "Olivia, I'll be direct. The Miller Foundation is developing a housing project called Gardens of Hope. It's a development intended for people in vulnerable situations, with an emphasis on accessibility. We need someone who coordinates the relationship with communities, who truly understands the needs of these people, not just theoretically." He paused, observing her intently. "Your personal experience combined with your education makes you an interesting candidate. The job allows flexibility and can be partially done from home, which would meet your current medical needs." Olivia blinked, incredulous. It was too good to be true. "Mr. Miller, Anthony, please." "Anthony," she corrected herself. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me." He smiled, a smile that didn't fully reach his eyes, where Olivia noticed a shadow of sadness. "Let's say I recognize the value of a second chance, and I also recognize determination when I see it." Maneuvering his chair to the window, he continued, "You know, Olivia, 3 years ago I was a different man, arrogant, focused only on business, ignoring the people around me, including my wife." His voice faltered slightly. "An accident changed everything. I lost my legs, I lost my wife. I almost lost the will to live. What saved me was finding a purpose greater than myself." Turning to face her, he concluded, "The Gardens of Hope is that purpose, and I believe that people who know suffering are more capable of helping others who suffer." Olivia felt a lump in her throat. There was truth in those words, a vulnerability she didn't expect to find in a powerful businessman. "I accept the position, and I promise to dedicate myself fully." "Great," Anthony responded, returning to a professional tone as if the moment of openness had never happened. "Martha will arrange the contract details. You can start on Monday." When Olivia left the building, she carried more than an employment contract in her purse. She carried renewed hope. However, she had no idea that she had just entered a world of intrigue and power, where her presence would awaken unexpected reactions. Richard Miller had observed Olivia's exit from his cousin's office with calculated interest. A young woman, pregnant, clearly of humble origin. What was Anthony plotting? Whatever the plan was, it represented a new variable in the equation he had been trying to solve for years: how to take full control of Miller Construction. "Who was that woman?" he asked his secretary as soon as he returned to his office. New hire for the foundation, sir. Anthony interviewed her personally. Richard smiled, a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. Interesting, very interesting. The following week, Olivia began her work at the Miller Foundation. The environment was welcoming, with a small but dedicated team. Her main function was to mediate the dialogue between the construction company and the families that would potentially benefit from the Gardens of Hope. Work that she carried out with genuine passion, recognizing herself in the stories she heard. Anthony monitored her progress from a distance, through reports and occasional meetings. There was something in Olivia's determination that intrigued and inspired him. Without realizing it, he began to await with anxiety the moments when their paths crossed in the company. In parallel, Olivia's health improved with the new work rhythm, less physically demanding. The medical visits became more optimistic, and the baby was developing normally. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to dream of a possible future. But the tranquility would be brief. On a rainy afternoon, Richard convened an extraordinary board meeting, claiming concerns about the company's direction. His true objective, however, was more sinister than anyone could imagine. The board meeting room was silent when Richard took the floor. Around the polished mahogany table, 10 executives waited, some curious, others visibly bothered by the sudden call. Anthony occupied the head, his impassive expression masking irritation at his cousin's maneuver. "Gentlemen, I've called this meeting because we need to discuss the direction that Miller Construction is taking," Richard began, adjusting his navy blue tie. "In recent months, significant resources have been diverted to the Gardens of Hope project, an initiative that, though noble in its conception, represents an unacceptable financial risk for the company." Anthony observed his cousin with a penetrating look. He had known Richard since childhood and knew how to interpret each inflection of his voice, each studied gesture. This wasn't just a financial concern, it was a calculated move. "Furthermore," continued Richard, "new hires have been made without the proper selection process, people without adequate qualifications assuming positions of responsibility based only on personal affinities." The insinuation was clear, and Anthony felt his blood boil. Richard was referring to Olivia, though he didn't mention her directly. "If you have something specific to say, Richard, say it clearly," Anthony interrupted, his calm voice contrasting with the inner storm. "My authority as president still allows me to make hiring decisions, especially for the foundation." Richard smiled, a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Of course, cousin. I just wonder if your physical condition isn't affecting your judgment in other aspects." A tense silence fell over the room. Never before had someone dared to question Anthony's ability so openly, much less make reference to his paraplegia as a factor of incompetence. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Anthony maintained his composure, though his eyes darkened dangerously. "Interesting theory, Richard. Do you suggest that my wheelchair has compromised my mental capacity? The financial results of the last quarter, the best in 5 years, contradict your concern." Turning his chair to face the other board members, Anthony continued, "The Gardens of Hope isn't just philanthropy, gentlemen. It's a pilot project that will revolutionize how we build for vulnerable populations. It's social innovation with the potential to transform into a new profitable segment. And regarding the questioned hiring, I suggest you examine the employee's record before making hasty judgments." The meeting continued tense, with Richard presenting distorted numbers and Anthony methodically dismantling each argument. In the end, the majority of the board remained on Anthony's side, though some seeds of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, unaware of the corporate conspiracies, Olivia was conducting a meeting with representatives of communities that would benefit from the Gardens of Hope. Her 6-month belly was now prominent, but her energy seemed to have multiplied with the new position. She spoke passionately about the project, patiently answering each doubt, transforming distrust into enthusiasm. "The differential of the gardens isn't just offering a roof," she explained to an elderly lady, "but creating a truly inclusive environment. We'll have ramps, elevators, braille signage, everything designed so that any person, regardless of their physical condition, can live with dignity." The conviction in her voice wasn't fabricated. In the week she had worked on the project, Olivia had fallen in love with Anthony's vision. She saw in that endeavor not just her personal salvation, but an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of hundreds of families. At the end of the meeting, exhausted but satisfied, Olivia was organizing her notes when she felt a strong contraction. She breathed deeply, leaning on the table. It wasn't the first time that week. The doctor had warned about the possibility of premature labor, a risk that increased with stress. "Olivia, are you okay?" asked Lily, a social worker who worked with her. "I am," she responded, trying to smile. "Just tired, and this little one is agitated today." Lily observed her with concern. "You should go home and rest. It doesn't help to help others if you don't take care of yourself." Reluctantly, Olivia accepted the advice. On the way to the apartment she now rented with her own salary, a significant progress compared to her previous situation, she reflected on how her life had changed in such a short time, from unemployed and without prospects to coordinator of an important social project, from staying as a guest to having her own space, modest but dignified, and all thanks to Anthony Miller, the enigmatic man who, for reasons she still didn't completely understand, had extended his hand to her when all others closed their doors. Olivia thought about him more than she would like to admit, not just as her benefactor or boss, but as the complex man she occasionally glimpsed behind the professional facade. There was a sadness in his eyes, a loneliness that echoed her own, and a strength of character that inspired her daily. Arriving home, Olivia prepared a tea and sat down to review some proposals. Even at rest, she couldn't completely disconnect from work. The phone rang, interrupting her concentration. "Olivia? It's Martha, Mr. Miller's secretary. He would like to know if you can come to his mansion tomorrow for a private meeting about the project. He would send a driver to pick you up." The request was unusual. All previous meetings had occurred in the office. "Of course, no problem. What time?" "At 7 o'clock if it's convenient. It will be a working dinner, actually." "A dinner? At his house?" Olivia felt a chill in her stomach that had nothing to do with the baby. "I'll be ready." The next morning, Richard Miller entered his office to find a folder on his desk. Intrigued, he opened it to discover a detailed report on Olivia Parker, her academic history, previous jobs, family situation, and, more interestingly, details about her pregnancy and abandonment by the child's father. "Excellent work, Steve." He praised the private detective he had hired, seated discreetly in a corner of the room. "Did you find anything particularly useful?" The middle-aged man, with a common appearance that made him perfect for his job, leaned forward. "She's actually qualified for the position, surprisingly. Interrupted education in administration, but with relevant experience. The interesting thing is your cousin's behavioral pattern in relation to her." "Continue," encouraged Richard, serving himself coffee. "Mr. Anthony has personally monitored her progress, requesting daily reports, intervening when necessary. Unusual behavior for a company president of that size with a mid-level employee." Richard smiled, a calculating smile. "As I suspected, my cousin always had a weakness for lost causes. First the absurd project, now this pregnant and helpless woman." He took a sip of coffee before continuing. "Steve, I want you to continue monitoring, especially this dinner tonight. I've already arranged it. I have a contact among the mansion staff." At the Miller mansion, Anthony was personally supervising the preparations for dinner, although Martha had convinced him to call it a working meeting. He knew his intentions went beyond the professional. There was something about Olivia that intrigued him, that made him want to know her better, to understand what moved her. Since the accident, Anthony had isolated himself emotionally. The loss of his wife, combined with his new physical condition, had erected walls around him. He had concentrated all his energy on business and, more recently, on the Gardens of Hope project. There was no space for personal relationships, for vulnerabilities, until he met Olivia. Her courage, her dignity in the face of adversity, awakened something he believed he had lost forever. Admiration. Not pity, not the kind of condescending sympathy he often received for his own condition, but genuine respect for someone's character. "Sir, the table is set as requested. Dinner for 2 on the veranda," informed the butler, interrupting his thoughts. "Thank you, Charles. And remember what we discussed. Nothing too formal. It's a work meeting." The butler nodded, though his look said he wasn't convinced. In 20 years serving the Miller family, he knew his employer well enough to perceive when something more was at stake. At 7 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Olivia had been punctual, a characteristic that Anthony appreciated. Charles led her to the veranda, where Anthony awaited her, his chair positioned by the elegantly set table with a view of the illuminated garden. Olivia was stunning in a simple but elegant dress, which gracefully accommodated her belly. She had tied her black hair in an unpretentious bun and wore only light lipstick as makeup. Her natural beauty, without artifice, contrasted with the sophisticated women who normally frequented that environment. "Olivia, welcome," Anthony greeted, indicating the chair across from him. "I hope you don't mind the more informal environment. Sometimes the best ideas arise outside the office." "It's a beautiful house," she commented, genuinely impressed with the mansion. "Thank you for the invitation." The dinner proceeded in a surprisingly comfortable manner. They discussed the project, of course, but the conversation soon drifted to personal topics. Anthony found himself telling stories of his childhood, of his complex relationship with his authoritarian father, of the constant pressure to prove his worth. "I believe I'm still trying to prove something," he admitted, surprising himself with his own sincerity, "to show that even in this chair, I'm still capable of making a positive mark on the world." Olivia observed him with an intensity that disconcerted him. There was no pity in her gaze, only understanding. "We all carry our burdens, Anthony. Yours are visible, mine not so much. But I think that's what connects us to the project. We both know what it's like to be judged by circumstances beyond our control." Her sincerity touched him deeply. Without realizing it, Anthony extended his hand across the table, lightly touching hers. The contact, though brief, sent an electric current through his body. How long had it been since he felt that connection with another human being? The moment was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. Charles had dropped a glass while serving wine. The butler apologized profusely, but Anthony noticed something strange in his behavior, an unusual nervousness in the always impeccable employee. The rest of the night proceeded without incident, but the climate had changed. A subtle tension, a mutual awareness had established itself between them. When the driver arrived to take Olivia back, Anthony felt an inexplicable reluctance to see her leave. "Thank you for dinner," she said at the door, "and for the trust in the project. I promise not to disappoint you." "I never thought you would," he responded with an intensity that surprised them both. That same night, Richard received a detailed report of the dinner. The incident of the broken glass had been intentional, an intervention by the butler, his informant. The attached photos clearly showed the moment when Anthony touched Olivia's hand, the look of evident interest on his face. "Perfect," murmured Richard, a plan taking shape in his mind. "My dear cousin, you just gave me the weapon I needed." In her apartment, Olivia couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, mentally reviewing each moment of the night. The imposing yet cozy mansion, so different from the coldness she would expect from a magnate, the delicious food, the easy conversation, with a man who, despite his power and position, showed himself vulnerable and human. And that touch, that brief moment when their hands met. What did it mean? Was it just a gesture of camaraderie, of human connection? Or was there something more, something she didn't dare name? "Don't be foolish, Olivia," she murmured to herself, caressing her belly. "He's your boss, a powerful man, and you're just—" But the phrase remained incomplete. What was she to Anthony Miller? An employee? A charity case? Or someone who, for some inexplicable reason, he saw as an equal? The baby moved vigorously, as if protesting against her confusion. Olivia smiled in the dark. "You're right, little one. Better not to complicate things. We're too lucky to risk it with fantasies." But as she finally fell asleep, it wasn't the project that populated her dreams. It was Anthony's intense gaze, the gentle strength of his hands, and the possibility, however remote it might be, that in that enormous mansion a lonely man thought of her with the same bewilderment. 2 weeks passed since the dinner at Ear. The Miller mansion. Olivia had immersed herself in work with even more dedication, as if seeking a distraction from the confused feelings that assailed her. The Gardens of Hope project was advancing rapidly, with the first phase of construction about to begin. It was a crucial moment that demanded all her attention. On that sunny September morning, Olivia was coordinating a meeting with architects and representatives of beneficiary families when Martha discreetly entered the conference room. "Olivia, sorry to interrupt, but there's an emergency. Can you come with me?" Concerned, Olivia excused herself from the group and followed Martha to a private room. "What happened?" she asked, feeling her heart accelerate. Her first thought was Anthony. Had he suffered an accident? Martha closed the door before responding, her expression grave. "Richard Miller has convened an extraordinary board meeting for this afternoon. According to my sources, he plans to propose the suspension of the Gardens of Hope and your dismissal." Olivia felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. "What? Why?" "He has a dossier about you, about Anthony. Insinuations of favoritism, of improper personal involvement." Martha hesitated. "There are photos of the dinner of moments that, out of context, may seem compromising." Understanding hit Olivia like lightning. The butler, the broken glass, the perfect timing. "It was a trap," she murmured. "He was watching us the whole time." "Anthony doesn't know yet," continued Martha. "He's in an external meeting and returns only for the board. I feared you might be approached by surprise, that's why I came to alert you." Olivia took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. "What can I do? If Richard has all this influence..." "Anthony is still the president, and the board respects him despite Richard's machinations." Martha lightly squeezed her shoulder. "Don't underestimate how much you mean to him, Olivia. I've never seen him like this since the accident." Martha's words awakened something in Olivia, a fierce determination that supplanted fear and insecurity. "Where can I find Richard now?" "In his office, probably preparing his presentation." Martha looked at her, surprised. "What do you intend to do?" A slight smile curved Olivia's lips. "Something I learned a long time ago. Face my problems head-on." Minutes later, Olivia was knocking on the door of Richard's office without announcing herself to the secretary. She entered without waiting for a response, finding him bent over, documents spread on the desk. "Miss Parker," he said without hiding his surprise. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Olivia closed the door behind her and advanced to the desk, sustaining Richard's calculating gaze without hesitation. "I've come to discuss your presentation to the board, the one where you intend to destroy the Gardens of Hope and my reputation." Richard leaned back in his chair, a cold smile on his lips. "I see you have good sources, impressive for someone so recent in the company." "Why do this?" Olivia asked directly. "The project will benefit hundreds of families, bring recognition to the construction company. What's your real problem?" "My problem?" Richard let out a dry laugh. "My problem is a sentimental cousin who puts emotions above business, who wastes resources on welfare projects when he should focus on profitability, and who apparently is so desperate for female company that he hires a pregnant indigent to satisfy some savior fantasy." The cruelty of the words hit Olivia like a physical blow, but she maintained her composure. "Is that what you think? That? I'm just a charity case, a case of pity. What else would you be?" Richard stood up, going around the desk to confront her closely. "Anthony always had this weakness. He thinks he can fix the world, especially after the wheelchair limited his potential in other areas." Olivia felt anger grow, not for herself but for Anthony. The way Richard referred to his cousin's condition was repulsive. "You don't understand anything, do you? You think the wheelchair diminished him, when in fact it made him more human, more connected to the real needs of people. This isn't weakness. Richard, it's the greatest strength I've ever seen in anyone." How moving, he mocked. "But sentimentalities don't build empires. My uncle understood this and took Miller to the top. Anthony is destroying that legacy and I won't allow it. It was then that Olivia understood. It wasn't just greed or cruelty. It was envy. Richard had always lived in his cousin's shadow, hoping that the accident would finally give him the control he so desired. And when Anthony, even in a wheelchair, continued to be a stronger and more respected leader, the resentment had transformed into hatred. "You'll never be half the man. Anthony is," she said calmly, without anger, "just stating a fact. No matter how many board meetings you manipulate, how many projects you sabotage, he has something you'll never have: integrity." Richard's face contorted in fury. "You think your pretty words will change anything? In a few hours you'll be unemployed, and Anthony will be under investigation for mismanagement. Maybe he'll even lose the presidency." "Don't count on it," Olivia responded, heading for the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. "You know what's ironic, Richard? You think you're protecting your uncle's legacy, when in fact you're destroying everything he built." Leaving the office, Olivia felt strangely calm. She had confronted Richard, but she knew that wouldn't change his plans. She needed something more, a strategy that would prevent the destruction of the project and protect Anthony. A strong contraction made her stop in the corridor, leaning against the wall. The doctor had warned about stress, about the risks, but now she couldn't stop. Breathing deeply, she continued her way to Lily's office, the social worker. "I need your help," she said, entering without ceremony, "and the help of all the community representatives we work with. Urgent." 3 hours later, the boardroom was filled not only with the usual executives, but with dozens of people who had never set foot on that floor. Families that would benefit from the Gardens of Hope, neighborhood association representatives, people with disabilities, all brought by Olivia and Lily in a lightning mobilization. When Anthony arrived, he found Richard already present, his face pale with fury at the unexpected invasion. "What's happening here?" he asked, maneuvering his chair to the head of the table. Olivia stepped forward, assuming a professional posture despite her prominent belly. "Mr. President, we learned of the extraordinary meeting to discuss the future of the Gardens of Hope. As the project coordinator, I took the liberty of bringing those who will be directly impacted by any decision taken today, the real people behind the numbers." Anthony's eyes shone with surprise and something more, admiration. Without knowing exactly what was going on, but trusting Olivia's instinct, he nodded. "An excellent initiative, Miss Parker. The board will certainly benefit from hearing directly from those involved." Richard stood up, trying to regain control. "This is irregular. We have a specific agenda, confidential issues." "What issues?" "Would those be, cousin?" Anthony interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "Why did you call this meeting in my absence?" The silence that followed was tense. Richard looked at the board members, at the families present, at Olivia. His plan had been destroyed before it even began. With those people as witnesses, he couldn't present his accusations without seeming petty and cruel. "I had concerns about the financial viability of the project," he finally responded, defeated. "But I see it would be insensitive to discuss them now, in front of those who will benefit." A murmur of approval ran through the room. Anthony, realizing that something bigger had happened, took control of the meeting. "In this case, I propose we transform this session into an official presentation of the Gardens of Hope. Miss Parker, could you conduct it?" What followed was a passionate presentation. Olivia explained every detail of the project, its social impact, the image return for the company, and how the innovations in accessibility would position Miller at the forefront of inclusive construction. The families present gave emotional testimonies, and even the most skeptical board members seemed touched. In the end, the board voted unanimously for the continuation and expansion of the project, an unprecedented feat. Richard was the only one to abstain, leaving the room even before the official closing. When everyone had left, only Anthony and Olivia remained in the meeting room. "You knew about Richard's intentions," he stated. "Not a question, but an affirmation." Olivia nodded. "Martha alerted me. He had photos of us from the dinner. He planned to use this against you, against the project. Anthony sighed, running his hand through his hair in a rare gesture of vulnerability. Olivia, I'm sorry for involving you in this. The power games of the Miller family shouldn't be your problem, especially in your condition. Don't underestimate me, she responded softly. I'm not a defenseless victim, Anthony. I chose to fight for this project because I believe in it. And in you. The look they exchanged was loaded with meaning. There was more there than professional respect, more than gratitude or admiration. There was a connection that both had tried to deny, but that now seemed incontestable. Anthony extended his hand, lightly touching hers. Why, Olivia? Why risk so much for someone you barely know? The question hung in the air, loaded with possibilities. Olivia felt her heart accelerate, not from fear but from anticipation. It was the moment of truth, of vulnerability. Because you were the only one who looked at me and saw more than a helpless pregnant woman, saw a capable person with value, she responded, her voice choked with emotion. And because against all logic, A strong contraction, much more intense than the previous ones, interrupted her. Olivia gasped, leaning on the table. Her face turned pale. Olivia! Anthony quickly advanced with his chair, alarmed. The baby, she managed to say, before another contraction hit her. I think it's coming. The events that followed were chaotic and, at the same time, precise. Anthony activated his team with impressive efficiency. In minutes, they were on the way to the hospital in the company limousine, with the driver receiving instructions to ignore any speed limits. At the hospital, Olivia was quickly admitted. Her doctor confirmed what they both already knew. The baby was coming, weeks before expected. The stress, the intense emotions, had accelerated the process. He needs to stay here, Olivia said, holding Anthony's hand when the nurses tried to move him away to prepare her. Please. The determination in her voice surprised everyone. The doctor hesitated briefly, then nodded. All right. The father can stay. Anthony opened his mouth to correct the misunderstanding, but something in Olivia's look stopped him. In that moment of extreme vulnerability, she had chosen him as her support, her anchor. It was a trust he wouldn't dare betray. The following hours were intense. Olivia faced labor with the same courage she had demonstrated in all previous challenges. Anthony remained by her side, offering silent support, strength when she weakened, encouragement when fear dominated her. When finally the baby's cry echoed through the room, something magical happened. An invisible bond, forged through shared adversities, solidified between them. It's a girl, announced the doctor, placing the small bundle in Olivia's arms. Exhausted but radiant, Olivia admired her daughter, perfect, healthy despite the mild prematurity. Tears of joy ran freely down her face when she raised her eyes to Anthony. Do you want to hold her? She asked, offering the baby. Anthony hesitated, a sudden fear crossing his gaze. I don't know if I can. What if I hurt her? You won't, Olivia responded with absolute certainty. I trust you. With trembling hands, he accepted the small bundle, the sensation of the minute life in his arms, so fragile and at the same time so resilient, awakened emotions he believed were dead. Tears he had repressed for years began to flow freely. She's beautiful, he whispered, completely surrendered to that new life. Like you. The moment of intimacy was interrupted by Martha's arrival, bringing flowers. Her eyes shone upon seeing the scene. Anthony holding the baby, Olivia looking at both with adoration. In the days that followed, Anthony practically moved to the hospital. He worked remotely, coordinated the start of construction on the Gardens of Hope, and conducted important meetings by phone, all without moving away from the room where Olivia and little Sophia, a name chosen together, meaning wisdom, were recovering. When the day of hospital discharge came, an inevitable question arose: where would they go? Olivia's apartment, although functional, didn't offer the ideal conditions for a premature newborn who required special care. Come to my house, Anthony offered when they were about to leave. I have plenty of space, nurses hired to help, everything you need. Olivia hesitated. Anthony, it's very generous, but I don't want you to feel obligated. You've already done so much for us." He took her hands in his, a gesture that now seemed natural, comfortable. "It's not obligation, Olivia. It's desire. My house was never a home, not since the accident, but with you there, maybe it could be." The sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability in his eyes, overcame any resistance. Olivia accepted, though insisting it would be a temporary arrangement, until Sophia was stronger. The adaptation to the Miller mansion was surprisingly easy. Charles, the butler, received them with genuine enthusiasm. His loyalty to Richard had been temporary, motivated by blackmail that Anthony quickly discovered and resolved. The hired nurses were competent and caring, and the house, previously silent and cold, filled with Sophia's occasional crying and the animated conversations between Olivia and Anthony during the nights. 3 months passed in this temporary arrangement. Sophia grew strong and healthy, the Gardens of Hope advanced at an accelerated pace, and the relationship between Olivia and Anthony deepened day after day. They shared meals, discussions about the project, moments of joy with Sophia's achievements, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, they became a family. One December night, while the mansion's gardens sparkled decorated for Christmas, Anthony found Olivia on the veranda, observing the city lights. Sophia slept peacefully in her room, monitored by an electronic baby monitor. "A penny for your thoughts," he said, approaching with his chair. Olivia smiled, that smile that now illuminated his days. "I was thinking about how unpredictable life is. A year ago I was desperate, rejected, without prospects. Today, he encouraged when she hesitated. Olivia turned to face him, her eyes bright in the moonlight. "Today, I have a wonderful daughter, a job I love, and—" She hesitated again, a soft blush coloring her cheeks. "And you. I have you in my life." Whatever that means. Anthony reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "It can mean whatever you want, Olivia. What we want it to mean." The air between them charged with unspoken possibilities, with feelings grown in adversity, matured in daily coexistence. "I'm afraid," she finally admitted, "not for myself, but for Sophia. Of building something that might be temporary, that might hurt her in the future." "Look at me, Olivia," Anthony asked, his voice soft but firm. "Do you think that after all we've been through, all we've built together, I would allow you and Sophia to leave my life? You are my family now, the family I chose, that I wished for without knowing I was wishing." The words hit Olivia like a wave of heat, tearing down the last barriers of hesitation. Without thinking, she leaned in and kissed him, a delicate kiss that carried promises of the future. When they separated, Anthony was smiling, a smile free of the sadness that had accompanied him for so long. "I love you, Olivia. I love Sophia as if she were my own daughter. And if you allow me, I want to spend the rest of my life demonstrating that." Olivia's response was another kiss, deeper, more certain. A kiss that sealed a pact not of convenience, but of true love, born of the most unlikely circumstances. In the following spring, the Gardens of Hope was inaugurated with great celebration. Hundreds of families received the keys to their new homes designed with accessibility and dignity. Among those present, Richard Miller observed from a distance, his resentment tempered by the incontestable success of the project he had tried to destroy. On the platform, Anthony gave a speech, with Olivia beside him holding Sophia, now almost a year old. This project was born from adversity, from the understanding that we all deserve second chances in life, that no one should be judged by circumstances beyond their control, that we all have value, regardless of our apparent limitations. His eyes met Olivia's, silently communicating the gratitude and love that had transformed their lives. The Gardens of Hope isn't just a housing complex. It's a symbol that when we extend a hand to help someone, often we are the true beneficiaries, that in lifting others, we elevate ourselves. At the end of the ceremony, amid applause and tears of happiness from the beneficiary families, Anthony asked for an additional moment. In front of everyone, maneuvering his chair to face Olivia, he took a small box from his pocket. "Olivia Parker, You transformed my house into a home, my existence into life, my solitude into family. Would you make me the happiest man in the world by officially sharing your surname with mine?" Tears were running freely down Olivia's face when she responded the simple yes that would forever change their lives. The crowd exploded in applause, celebrating not just the inauguration of the project, but the love that had been born between the unlikely couple. The wedding was held in the garden of the Miller mansion 3 months later. A simple but elegant ceremony, with the presence of families benefited by the Gardens of Hope, Foundation employees and, to everyone's surprise, Richard. Anthony's cousin appeared discreetly, keeping himself distant during most of the celebration, but at the moment of congratulations, he approached the couple. "You proved me wrong," he admitted, with unprecedented humility. "The project is a success, and you really seem happy." Anthony extended his hand, which Richard shook after a moment of hesitation. It wasn't complete forgiveness, nor immediate reconciliation, but it was a beginning, a mutual recognition that the past, with its hurts and resentments, could give way to a different future. 5 years passed. The Gardens of Hope became a national model of inclusive housing, replicated in other cities. The Miller Foundation, now presided over by Olivia, expanded its operations to educational and health projects, always with a focus on accessibility and dignity. Sophia, now a vibrant and curious child of 6, had gained a brother, Michael, the biological son of Anthony and Olivia, born 2 years after their marriage. The family lived in the mansion, completely renovated to make it more welcoming, and adapted not only for Anthony's wheelchair, but to constantly receive children and families from social projects. On a sunny Sunday, while watching Olivia playing in the garden with the children, Anthony reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them there, how a casual encounter in a hospital corridor had changed the course of their lives, how adversity, which seemed to have condemned him to eternal solitude, had ended up opening the way for the greatest happiness he had ever known. "What are you thinking about?" asked Olivia, approaching with Sophia in her arms and Michael clinging to her leg. "Second chances," he responded, pulling Michael onto his lap. "About how life sometimes takes us on tortuous paths just to show us that happiness can be found in the most unexpected places." Olivia leaned in to kiss him, a kiss full of fulfilled promises and future promises. Sophia laughed, clapping enthusiastic hands. "Daddy and Mommy kissing again," exclaimed the girl, making the parents laugh. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Olivia found Anthony on the veranda, the same place where they had shared their first kiss. "I received a phone call today," she commented, sitting beside him. "Do you remember Teresa, from the shelter where I stayed when I discovered the pregnancy? She recommended a young woman for our program, 19 years old, 7 months pregnant, rejected by her family." Anthony took her hand, immediately understanding. "Like you were." Olivia nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "I thought we could offer her an apartment in the new Gardens of Hope, and maybe a position as an intern at the foundation." Extending a hand, as they did to you, he completed, with a proud smile. "Life is a cycle, isn't it? What we receive, we return to the world in some form." Anthony pulled her closer, grateful once more for the extraordinary woman fate had placed in his path. "You know what I love most about you? Your capacity to transform pain into purpose, to see beauty where others see only tragedy." Under the starry sky, embraced on the veranda of the house that was truly a home, Anthony and Olivia contemplated the future. A future built, not despite adversities, but through them. A love story that had begun with a casual encounter between a desperate pregnant woman and a man bound to a wheelchair, and that had transformed into a powerful force for change, not just for them, but for an entire community. Because true love doesn't just heal individual wounds, it overflows, reaching other hearts, creating waves of transformation that extend far beyond the couple. And that night, under the same sky that had witnessed their first meeting, they silently renewed their commitment, not just to each other, but to all those who, like them once, needed just a chance, an extended hand, someone who would see beyond appearances and believe in their value. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Olivia and Anthony has touched your hearts. To continue this exciting journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here, clicking to the left. If you liked this story of overcoming and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring